On the interview segment of the show today, now our first topic is going to be focusing on the e-commerce sector, looking at the performance of MSMEs with a view on the impact of technology towards growth and some of the catalysts that we expect to play out in the year 2022. And then for the second part of the show, we'll also be shifting our conversation, discussing issues emanating from the move by the federal government, introducing 6% tax on digital services in the country. Welcome to the show. Let's now bring you up to speed with some of the news making the headlines across the country today. Now, 40 million Nigerians are set to become beneficiaries of the Phase 1 of the Presidential Power Initiative to boost the reliability of electricity supply across the country. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, announced this at the flag-off of the PPI training on network development studies by the Federal Government of Nigeria Power Company in Abuja. The initiative would create 11,000 direct and indirect jobs in the country, as its aim is to improve the living standard of Nigerians through the provision of constant and affordable electricity. The Federal Government of Nigeria Power Company Limited was first established by the federal government to coordinate the PPI, which has been done in partnership with the German firm Siemens. And now a total of 40 billion naira so far been spent on the Export Expansion Facility program since it was first launched about 12 months ago. This was disclosed by the Nigerian Export Promotion Council at the NEPC EEFP Stakeholder Interactive Session in Abuja. The NEPC Executive Director and the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Ezra Yakusak, also says that the EEFP aims to protect export businesses from the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, safeguard jobs and de-risk the economy from shock. Dr. Yakusak also says its primary goal is to increase Nigeria's export capacity in the near term and its export volumes in the medium term. The NEPC boss also says 281 Nigerian companies had already benefited from the fund through the COVID grant relief. In this next story, the National Information Technology Development Agency engaged in 17 data breach investigations and issued 15 million naira fines in the year 2021. This was disclosed in the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation Performance Report for 2020 to 2021, which was launched by the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Professor Issa Pantami, just last week. The report further disclosed that 7 investigations have been concluded and sanctions imposed on 3 entities. It was also disclosed that the number of ongoing investigations on alleged data breaches rose from 15 in 2020 to 17 in 2021, while the number of investigations concluded rose from 1 in 2020 to 7 in the year 2021. In addition to this amount now, fines issued rose from 1 million naira in 2020 to 15 million naira in 2021. The report further disclosed that NIDA was also partnering with key stakeholders to ascertain appropriate sanctions for different kinds of violations of the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. Well, it's now time to bring you the part 1 of our interview segment on the show today. Now, the advent of e-commerce is no doubt having a very big impact on the entrepreneurs in a country, with small and medium-scale enterprises taking advantage of social media and other digital platforms to increase their sales. A significant number of MSMEs are riding on these platforms to reach millions of customers in the country and across the continent and even beyond the continental region, raking in more revenue compared to the past. However, investors are taking positions or stakes in the country's growing tech ecosystem, fueled by attractive fundamentals like country's youthful and also tech-savvy population, increase in smartphone and internet penetration, large unbanked population, among other factors, to boost the investment climate in the e-commerce sector and also encourage growth in the MSME sector. Well, joining me now live in our Lagos studio to break down and analyze the impact of e-commerce in the tech sector as well as MSME performance, looking at a space in its entirety, I have investment strategist at AfriInvest Assets Management Limited, Temitope Omoshi. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today, Temitope.
Thank you.
We've seen quite an interesting transition, a facelift, and then a move in terms of how we're seeing MSMEs play in the digital space, e-commerce really. From the year 2020, when we saw the peak of COVID-19, we saw a bigger leverage of technology here play out. Now, looking at the entry cases that played out in 2020, 2021, how would you rate the performance there? Some of the new twists that we expect as well for the year 2022, setting the tempo, really.
It's quite interesting to know that technology upon which e-commerce is built is revolutionizing different sectors of the economy. So e-commerce, it has to do with moving from the brick and mortar trading activities to the internet. And there are different types. You have the business to business, business to customer, customer to customer, and customer to business, about 4 segments of e-commerce. So interestingly, like you've mentioned, in 2020, as a result of the pandemic, we saw that people could not go to physical stores. So because there was a platform already, and we saw that telecommunications sector has already garnered significant momentum in terms of teledensity. Number of telecommunication subscribers in terms of data subscribers increased to over 140 million people. Teledensity was just about, I think, about 50% in 2010, but now we are over 100%. That is, teledensity is the number of active phone users per 100 people. So a lot of people, in fact, FINA reported, that's Enabling Financial Inclusion and Asset, reported that 80% of Nigerian adults have mobile phones. So that tells you the e-commerce or the internet space is a ready market for MSME. So interestingly, like I said, the 2020, a lot of people were able to, still patronize small and medium scale businesses because, the internet was a platform for them. But I think what is even more interesting is the data on food and beverages. When you look at the real GDP, 2016, we saw that the sector declined by about 6% in 2016, but we saw that in 2020 this sector actually went up. That is food, beverages. You know that if you look at other sectors that are highly concentrated in the MSME, that is food, footwears and all of that, because people didn't need to change their clothes and all of that. Had to eat. Yes, so it went up. It was because the platform was already there for MSME. So I think the MSME in Nigeria really leveraging technology to thrive. And I think maybe at some point the MBS could do a kind of granular analysis into Nigerian labor market statistics. I'm sure in terms of the employment in the in e-commerce, or what is called the creators economy. Creators economy is where people create content, move their product around on the internet. I'm sure we would have seen significant, uptick in terms of labor, in terms of employment in the e-commerce space. And the importance of MSME cannot be overemphasized in any economy. Exactly. For instance, Nigeria, it accounts for over 50% of the economy size, and about 90% of all businesses are MSME. This is not just specific to Nigeria. The US, UK, South Africa, at least 90% of all businesses are MSME. So technology is like leveling the ground for them, because before now you had businesses, oligopoly across businesses. That is, businesses have very few players, and it became very difficult for MSME to cope and penetrate. But now it's leveled, and when you look at challenges to MSMEs, for instance, access to finance, now that is not going to be a major problem. Why? Because as a player in the MSME space, you don't need to stock products. What people do on the internet is to just showcase their products. They might not even have any inventory. Once they see a buyer, they get from supplier and they match it. So you don't have to bother about finance or stocking your product. In fact, access to market, that is quite interesting, because before now, MSME, you have to look at how to penetrate the market, but you have about 30 million data subscriber in Nigeria. Interestingly for me is the fact that before now, it's usually very difficult to analyze Nigerians that have strong purchasing power. But that, because internet has in a way filtered the number of people that can afford product and services. If you cannot afford product and services, you won't buy data. What I'm saying in essence is that in a way it has filtered, market that can actually afford. A red market ready to patronize. Exactly. Okay. So I think that's quite interesting there. Now,
I would like us to look at the outlook for the year 2022. We are looking at a mutating COVID-19. We're still optimistic that we are not necessarily going to see a lockdown in terms of the continental region. We cannot see what will play out on the international front in the Europes and America and Asia, for example, but still staying within Africa now. what sort of outlook do you see us having in terms of the reach of MSMEs? You made mention of a situation whereby MSMEs are now leveraging and having a bigger reach, but that cannot still be compared to that of large corporates if we really want to paint the picture as clearly as possible. But now for those MSMEs within agriculture, within fashion, within the services sector, food and beverages and much more, how do you see things taking shape for this year 2022, having at the back of their minds that anything can happen at any point in time? In a best case or worst case scenario, if we have a virus that forces people to go back home, how would things play out? If things are going on the steady path, how do you think things would also evolve as businesses are getting back on track, as usual, pre-COVID?
So interestingly, I think, MSME businesses have learned to cope with, things
have
like
they?
Yes, in a way, because
it's a gradual learning curve.
Yeah, because you are now more flexible. You know that the internet is there as a market. In fact, physical market you cannot penetrate because you don't have the resources. I mentioned that one of the challenges to MSME is access to finance and even access to market. So I think that's an advantage MSME has over large businesses. As a matter of fact, large businesses are also looking at strategizing in such a way that they will change their strategy to cater to retail ends of the market. They are in a way adopting some of our small scale businesses strategy, because you cannot, we talk about the fact that per capita income in Nigeria is quite low, purchasing power is really affected. So people are really looking at MSME, they patronize them more, except for products and services that are exclusively rendered or you can only get from large businesses. But I think interestingly, I think the most important thing that needs to happen in the MSME is the fact that a chunk of it is informal. I think that is even the major concern. Because when you are using the e-commerce platform, that is technology, it's only add to the number of physical customers you have or your working client or customer. So I think the most important thing is for us to begin to look at how we get more businesses into the formal sector, and that will help a lot in terms of expanding or increasing the potential of small businesses. We want to move from small businesses to medium into large, so that they don't just remain at that level, because they will remain comfortable with using e-commerce platform, social media, because that is a kind of safe haven. They will be able to evade taxes, all of those challenges that are currently affecting big businesses. So I think the attention should now be drawn towards how to make the business environment attractive for people that are on the internet, to look beyond just focusing on about 33 million subscribers. They should also look at frontiers of the market that have not been explored, which are people that are not unbanked, people that are not banked, and people that are not within the scope of the internet, that don't have access to the internet, because we know that some people still have trust issues when it comes to technology. So these are markets that are not tapped. So I think for MSME to expand their scope, for them to optimize their potential, they should also look beyond just the internet, and government has a role to play, which was why I said ease of doing business is very critical.
Okay, now talking about the transition of MSMEs from this stage, looking at them move from small moving to medium and then large corporates. Now we also have to face the reality that as they're also growing and offering much more product solutions and services, there's the need to also present data. Data security management within this regard is also one of the biggest challenges for so many MSMEs that find themselves doing business online. Now, as much as it is interesting to offer more services, there's the need for certain sensitive data to be provided. Now, within this scope, how do you expect, or what's the response you're getting as well, or the expectation from MSMEs in guarding so carefully customer data? Because abroad we see what's going on, and then for the average Nigerian, it's still simplistic to think that Nigerians don't understand or can wrap their head around the scope of their data going out there in the public without having any control, just because they sign into a particular website or they sign into a particular social media or click a link.
So I think, sensitization.
That's why you made mention of a trust deficit somewhere.
In fact, companies, some MSMEs have taken it upon themselves to educate the investment, or let's say the public, basically, in a bit to just help them to understand how to check for security. In a bit to support your point or to consolidate what you've said, I've mentioned on this program before that there's this report, Edema Trust Index. The index talks about the fact that trust in technology has reduced, but trust in some sectors of the economy has actually increased in the last 10 years. And the reason for lack of trust or deficit trust in technology is as a result of, cyber crimes and all of that. It's not just specific to Nigeria. It's a global problem. I think which also battered the global data protection, that has to do with so that battered all that. So I think it's a work in progress, there's collaboration in that area. I'm sure the Nigeria Technology Department of Technology and Data Protection Nigeria is also working on that. And in fact, a lot of people are now informed that whenever you see a website that does not have the X, HTTPX, is that the X stands for security, according to what I heard. All of those tips it's even the onus lies on the user to go online to learn how to identify fictitious website and how to detect, website that can be malicious to transaction, things like that, because it's a global problem. It's not specific to Nigeria. So I think, and again, why in a way I think trust in technology, or let's say the way people embrace social media in terms of transaction in Nigeria, has maybe increased somewhat, because you see that the value of transaction across the board is not as much as what you will see in big companies. So I think maybe that could be the reason why people are less sensitive to risk, or they're having some level of trust on on technology and social media.
Temitope, we are wrapping up our conversation now. Let's also have one of the big entrants we are expecting for the year 2022, which would also redefine how we also play big in terms of business online, 5G connectivity. That's also bringing to bear a whole new space of faster connectivity, internet speed. In terms of turnaround time of complaints, the MSMEs have to deal with in terms of customer satisfaction, seamless transaction, and a whole lot more. How do you see things also playing out, leveraging on 5G technology as we see a stronger deployment come to bear in the year 2022?
You have said what is even more important in terms of efficiency. So once efficiency comes to bear, you know what it means to profitability. You have more quicker, efficient turnaround time. You are able to attend to more customers, and ultimately it will bring down your cost. In fact, your product and services, you'll be able to find a way to bring down the cost. And consumers now, because of high inflation, consumers are sensitive to prices. Because you are more efficient, you'll be able to bring down your price and you become more efficient. So I think it's a good one for both. It's a win-win for both customers and and business. So really in 2022 and going forward, I think the development in technology, the 5G, and a number of other inventions we are seeing in that space is all in a bid to ensure that transaction business activities are performing as well as expected.
And then let's wrap up our conversation now, lastly, within the scope of interconnectedness, and then also leveraging on resource base of different sectors. Now, looking at agriculture, for example, now the conversation within the country is that we have to make agriculture come back one more time as the mainstay. In terms of the value chain now, how do you think we can also leverage on tech giants, both as well as the small ones here in the country, to also leverage on these and then help satisfy some of the problems that we have as at now? Insecurity largely still remains. How do you also think we can also have some of these solutions come to bear, especially from the source to reaching the end user in terms of linkages now?
So when it comes to agriculture, like you said, I think the problem is outside the purview of just having an app or some kind of technology that would actually address the challenges in that space. One of the challenges is insecurity. So I think if we're able to address insecurity, then we will solve the problem around food insecurity, and we'll address a lot of problem in the agricultural space. It's also very important to stress that Nigeria should not be looking at making or focusing on agriculture as the mainstay of the economy, because we know that there is a problem that comes with when you focus on resources, when you focus on commodity. They are volatile. which is currently affecting oil prices and other commodities. That is, you are susceptible to global price movement.
But the reality remains that the average Nigerian has to eat, and then we're still waiting for a time whereby just by the click of our phones, we have the delivery of our food, our beverages, and a whole lot more right straight from the market or wherever the source may be and then arrive. So in terms of that sort of interconnectedness, those who are playing within the retail space, those who are doing the branding and a whole lot more, that's what I'm really talking about.
So
now, how do you see that taking shape?
We have all of that. We have a number of them. In fact, I know that we have a number of them that are able to connect, people to the market. They get farm produce for you and all of that. But what I'm saying in essence is that if
we
you
have
don't
to deal with
solve
insecurity,
the foundational problem, they won't become efficient. In fact, it will affect
that stifles the potential to grow.
If there's no output, if there's no sufficient output, you won't see anything on the apps, you won't see anything on the platform. In fact, you will continue to see increase in prices. So Nigerians are very brilliant. Coming up with apps that will enhance the agro space is never a problem. It's never a problem. I'm sure if you check online, you'll see one or two apps that have even addressed what you're talking about, but they will tell you that the problem is still ability to predict the agri space, prices, and output. So the focus has to be how we are going to address the fundamental problem, which has to do with output, agriculture sector output. And again, we should begin to look beyond. So I think for me, it's all about the efficiency of the sector. Like what you said, technology will come to enhance the efficiency and not about having more people into the sector.
For the MSME player who is looking to play big this year, what's your word to them?
So really, they should continue to learn from what is happening on the internet because it's evolving. And they should look at developing their strategy. They should make it dynamic because the platform, you have everything. In fact, you can imitate what is happening in advanced economy, bring it to Nigeria. You don't need to rack your brain. It's just about bringing some things that are working
and contextualize it to what plays out here.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for your time on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Tumitope Omoshi. It's really been a good pleasure having you here, and we hope that we continue to have an evolving space where we have big players come out here from Nigeria and the West African front, the continental front, and then challenge the status quo we have as a universe. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you.